Good evening. And welcome to the show. I am Piers Morgan, filling in for Larry King. Tonight my guest is Miss N. She is a doctoral student at Fresno State. She will be sharing valuable information with her cohort members on qualitative research methods. Welcome Ms. N. Thank you for joining me.
Good evening Mr. Morgan. It is a pleasure to be here. I am thrilled to share what I have learned about qualitative research with my cohort members. Let me begin by saying that there are 4 important questions you should consider before conducting qualitative research.
Well Miss N, before you tell us, let's give our television viewers the chance to shout them out. Stephen, you are a pretty sharp guy, why don't you tell us what they are?
Excellent Stephen. I can tell you did your reading. You are correct. One should consider if they want to generate new theories, because qualitative research is where interesting and valuable new theories and hypotheses originate. The second question to consider is whether or not you need to achieve a deep understanding of the issue.
And if you do,
then qualitative research is a good approach because it has special value for investigating complex and sensitive issues. For example, if you want to know how people view topics such as God and religion or the death penalty, it would be difficult to use quantitative methods and get findings beyond a few key positions on the issues.
Very interesting indeed. So what you're saying, Miss N, is that qualitative methods provide a deeper understanding of the issues that researchers are investigating.
Yes, and quantitative methods have their place too, but qualitative methods, such as interviews, help the researcher gain a deeper understanding of how people think about these topics.
Oh, I see. And the third question?
The third question has to do with generalizability. Qualitative research generates detailed information about a topic.
Or yes, it is a more complex process to generalize across a sample of interviews or written documents.
You've got it, Mr. Morgan. And the fourth and final question to consider is the availability of funding. Funding is usually a big issue in qualitative research because it takes an enormous amount of time and is very labor-intensive.
And don't forget, it yields results that may not be as generalizable for policy making and decision making.
Yes, and many funding sources view it as a frill, or as simply too expensive.
Well, Miss N, you have certainly gotten me thinking about quantitative and qualitative methods. And which one would be a better approach?
Well, Mr. Morgan, the qualitative-quantitative debate is certainly a hot-button issue in social science research. Let's take a commercial break and give my cohort members a chance to discuss the pros and cons of each method in small groups.
Welcome back, Cohort 4. In your discussion you may have found that both quantitative and qualitative methods combined provide the most in-depth analysis.
That's correct, Mr. Morgan. Almost every applied social research project combines both qualitative and quantitative methods. Now, let's briefly discuss 3 types of qualitative data: in-depth interviews, direct observation, and written documentation. In-depth interviews include both one-on-one as well as group interviews like focus groups. Data can be recorded by audio, video, or in written format.
Or yes, and how do interviews differ from direct observation?
Well, with direct observation the observer does not actively query the respondent. Observation can include field research where one lives in another context or culture. And finally, written documentation. This refers to gathering information from existing documents such as newspapers or magazines to conduct a content analysis.
And is one type of data better than the other?
As with anything, each has benefits and limitations. The type of data collected will be determined by the type of research question one begins with.
Yes, Miss N. That seems logical.
Now, Mr. Morgan, there are a few additional topics I would like to discuss before I go. Qualitative approaches, methods, and the notion of validity.
Excellent, Miss N. Let's begin with qualitative approaches. If I remember correctly, they are ethnography, phenomenology, field research, and grounded theory.
Very impressive indeed. Well, for time purposes we'll cover 3 of the 4. My friend Mr. White will be discussing ethnography a bit later. Phenomenology is a school of thought that emphasizes a focus on people's subjective experiences and interpretations of the world.
And so, a phenomenologist wants to understand how the world appears to others.
You've got it, Mr. Morgan. Another approach is field research. The essential idea is that the researcher goes into the field to observe the phenomenon in its natural state. The field researcher typically takes extensive field notes which are subsequently coded and analyzed in a variety of ways. Our final approach is grounded theory. The purpose of grounded theory is to develop theory about phenomena of interest. Grounded theory is a complex incremental process. The research begins with the raising of generative questions which help to guide the research. As the researcher begins to gather data, core theoretical concepts are identified.
Oh, I see. Very interesting indeed.
Now let's talk about qualitative methods. There are 4 that we will consider: participant observation, direct observation, unstructured interviewing, and case studies.
Yes, I remember reading somewhere that participant observation is one of the most common methods for qualitative data collection, and one of the most demanding.
Yes, it requires the researcher to become a participant in the culture or context being observed. It often requires months or years of intensive work because the researcher needs to become accepted as a natural part of the culture.
And is this to assure that the observations are of the natural phenomenon?
Yes. That is correct, Mr. Morgan. And the opposite is direct observation, because here the researcher strives to be as unobtrusive as possible so as not to bias the observations.
So would an example be something like using technology such as videotaping to observe phenomenon?
Yes. And next we have unstructured interviewing, which involves direct interaction between the researcher and a respondent or group. There is no formal structured instrument or protocol. The interviewer is free to move the conversation in any direction of interest that may come up. The final method that we will discuss is the case study, which involves an intensive study of a specific individual or specific context.
Yes. Freud developed case studies of several individuals as the basis for the theory of psychoanalysis, and Piaget did case studies of children to study developmental phases.
The final topic I would like to share with my cohort members is qualitative validity. Some qualitative researchers reject the framework of validity that is commonly accepted in more quantitative research in the social sciences. They reject the basic realist assumption that there is a reality external to our perception of it.
Therefore, it doesn't make sense to be concerned with the truth or falsity of an observation with respect to an external reality.
Yes. And that is the basis of validity. Guber and Lincoln proposed 4 criteria as an alternative for judging the soundness of qualitative research. Credibility involves establishing that the results are believable from the perspective of the participant in the research.
Transferability refers to the degree to which the results can be generalized or transferred to other contexts or settings.
Yes. And dependability is equivalent to the quantitative view of reliability, which is the assumption of repeatability. Confirmability refers to the degree to which the results could be confirmed or corroborated by others.
Well, Miss N, I certainly have learned a lot today. The qualitative research method provides researchers with the ability to describe the phenomena of interest in great detail, and that the best research approach is a mixed methods model combining both quantitative and qualitative methods. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Please join us again in the future to discuss more topics on research and education.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. I would be delighted.